Welcome to Running the Table. We've made it to the national championship. Tomorrow night, UConn versus Michigan. But without further ado, let's run it. Question is, how did we get here? And we had two Final Four games that were rather unique and not necessarily what we expected. And of
That
course,
we
we
went to.
I was going to say that you and I did go to. And stay tuned for a little vlog that we have put together. We recorded some fun stuff along the way, trying to bring you guys along with on our wild little adventure of going down to Indianapolis and taking on Fan Fest as well as the two games. So it was a very fun experience, made for a very long day. But I'm excited to get that out to you guys. But for the basketball side, you have to start off with the UConn-Illinois game for game one, and not at all the game that I expected. It was very, very low scoring. Then not a whole lot of made baskets, and not exactly a super pretty game of basketball overall.
Man, what you talking about? That was fun. Although it
It was
did
only
turn into
fun
a
to you
bit of,
because UConn won.
well, it was no, it was a fun game regardless. Don't
You would
don't
have
do
called it.
that. Don't it
You would
was
have
much
called it
better than
BS if UConn lost. It was much better than game
it was
two. I'll
much
give you
better
that
than the
much.
second game. Listen, just because it was a bit of a foul fest and there was a bit of a loose whistle at times, doesn't mean that the basketball was any less entertaining.
That's the thing, though, is like you call it a loose whistle, and there were certainly some times where, there was a lot of random fouls called, but I also saw many, many examples of UConn getting away with a lot of physical defensive play on Illinois as well, especially namely on Keaton Wagler.
Ah, bro, welcome
And
to the Big East. I know there's the one clip of Caravan getting a steal on Wagler. Man, that's just physical basketball. That is how we do it in the Big East.
it's a foul, but it is physical basketball. I'll give you that
That's
much.
normal.
But
That is
throughout,
normal play. If you're not willing to bang,
call
don't
it
play ball with
normal,
us.
call it not. Regardless, it is a foul. But over the course of that game, there was just a whole lot of weird randomness, especially with Illinois. They just could not buy a bucket throughout so much of this game. Looking back on it, but in the moment, there were so many shots that just rolled in and out, that bounced all over the rims. They got a lot of good looks, especially from three, that just didn't fall. They were 6 for 26 from beyond the arc, only 23%. And all they would have needed in this game, when you look at the score, is just a couple more shots to fall here and there. But credit to UConn for making it real difficult on them.
I'm also kind of disappointed in Illinois' rebounding. I thought they'd be a little bit better, but I give more credit to UConn than, Illinois' lack of rebounding. I think UConn did a really good job of crashing the glass both offensively and defensively, but it had to have been a factor where we thought that was going to be a big advantage for Illinois, and it ended up not being. And yeah, you just got to make your shots. It seemed when Illinois would get something going, it would end up, being trading baskets
Mhm.
at best, and in a position where, if you deliver a punch, the other team responds, it's going to be hard to come back, especially if you're down for most of the game.
Yeah, and I think a big portion of that, especially when you mention the rebounding, first of all, you gotta to credit Terrace Reed, who put up a very, very solid performance, 17 and 11 on 6 of 12 shooting. I honestly think they could have gone to him a lot more. Was really dominant early, and they just kind of started going away from him. They shot a lot more threes than I ever thought that UConn would shoot. Credit to them, they were making a fair amount of them, which is, I think, why they kind of kept going to him. But Illinois still out rebounded them 44 to 37. But you're right that we thought that was going to be a more major positive for the Fighting Illini. And outside of Terrace Reed, you really have to highlight Silas Demery Jr., who put up 7, 9, and 7. He had 9 rebounds, which is super, super impressive. So a near triple double that is instead a triple single, but still an impressive performance out of him nonetheless. One of the things that I think is interesting to highlight, that I would like to highlight right now, is the conversation lately that's been around the use of the brand new basketballs at the NCAA tournament, and also especially here at the Final Four. Because some people had a lot of commentary on the fact that, like, first of all, neither of these teams shot that well. And I would say out of these games, the only team that I think that shot well is Michigan, and we'll talk about them later. But there's been a lot of conversation about the fact that these brand new basketballs that they're using are really, really inflated and overinflated, and it's causing a lot more of kind of crazy bounces around than you would typically see. And I think you might have some amount of merit when you look at some of the way that Illinois shots kind of bounced around the rim and rolled off a lot more than I would typically see. Now, granted, obviously all these teams are playing with the same basketball or same basketballs, but it is something to note that it's just interesting that it has been a significant enough talking point that people have brought it up of seeing videos of people bouncing a basketball and doing a normal dribble and it coming up to their head.
Interesting. It's quite the theory. Not something that I've seen, but maybe it's not because I'm paying enough attention to the specific kind of basketballs. But if
I think it's
Illinois
less of the
fans
kind
want to
of basketball
use
and more of
that,
the more of just how much air is in it.
well, if that's what Illinois fans are saying as to why their shots didn't fall,
I
UConn
don't even
plays with
think
the
it's
same
a
ball.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying is that it's not that it's in favor of one
Make
team
your
versus another.
shots.
This is not a deflate gate thing, but it is something interesting to notice about
No, it would be
essentially
Inflategate
how
then.
yeah, exactly. It's interesting to note when you look at some of the just overall scores in the tournament. And sometimes you can say like, oh, the tournament's just a lot more defensive and it's a lot more gritty. In some ways, I think that there is something that can be said about, teams just not shooting as well as they're
Um,
typically
I don't
capable
know.
of
You
doing.
still got your high scoring games. I mean, there's still a few teams that put up triple digits and even some losing teams that put up 75, 80, 85 points in these efforts. And I'm just looking at from the later rounds, much less the earlier rounds. So I don't know. I feel like when you shoot it well, you score a lot of points. And teams that are shooting it well just simply shoot it well. I don't necessarily think that the field goal percentage and the 3-point percentage have been any higher or lower
Mhm.
than in years past, but I mean Arizona's shots did seem like they took some funky bounces sometimes, but that was just kind of par for the course of the how the night was going. And
Mhm.
Michigan, when they shot it, it was nothing but net, and Michigan went on their run too. So I mean, I don't not
I have some
to
other commentary about that I'll bring up in the second half of this, but the only I would say other commentary that I have about this game specifically is you were right when you talk about whenever Illinois got something going, it felt like they started trading. Well, another thing that I saw watching this game is whenever Illinois started going on a little bit of a run, they also started shooting themselves in the foot, whether it was they would go and turn the ball over, or they would make a shot. There was one where they made a shot and Kylan Boswell immediately picks up a foul and sends UConn to the line in the bonus. They were not particularly disciplined in this game and were a little sloppy. You had, 8 turnovers, obviously, 17 fouls overall. It just felt like they weren't really on top of their game in especially just being under control, and that did help UConn in terms of just holding on to the lead even as Illinois started to gain a little bit of momentum throughout the course of the second half.
the chain smokers in between games were cool. That was
that
fun.
that was a very interesting experience for a little throwback to the 2015 energy that they were calling out for from the crowd, having that little halftime conference, but a
Much like the
conference, not a conference, that's a concert.
much like the intermission between games, our little intermission as we segue and transition to the second game. You like how I did that? Yeah, that was great. I'm patting myself on the back for that one. It's
You're
my best
so
work.
you're so good at that. And you want to know who didn't put up their best work? Arizona. That game was sad.
And I
This
just
game
said that I hope both teams have fun. Only one team had fun.
Arizona did not have fun. And I also can
Yeah.
assure you, Arizona fans in that arena did not have fun. We had a couple of Arizona fans sitting directly in front of us, and some
And
of
then
those
to our
guys
right,
were,
as we move down,
yes, we
which
we
I don't even know how that happened.
yeah, somehow we managed to reconnect with them halfway across the arena. But this was literally Michigan jumped on them straight from the start. If I remember correctly, it was a 10-1 game just a couple minutes in. Arizona could not find baskets, from the get-go, and Michigan poured it on them and never backed down, really, for the entire game. Especially highlighting performances. They had no real answer for Adai, which I wasn't necessarily expecting because Arizona, obviously, with the physical front court that they also have a tall presence of their own who is very athletic and good on both defense and offense in Mo Krivas. And really, Mara kind of took it to Krivas as much as possible whenever he was in the game, but this was just kind of Michigan domination on all fronts.
I mean, so much for calling a Daimara soft 50 billion times during the game. You
Yeah,
can only call a
those
guy soft, well, and use other words for that so many times, but when you look up at the box score and he's got 26, 9, 3, and some other stuff on 11 of
two
16
blocks too.
shooting, yeah, well, that's the other stuff. Thank you, Tim. You know, you got to tip your cap,
Yeah.
or you can
Yeah,
be bad. Either way, he still put 26 on your head.
yeah, and he did it really efficiently as well on that 11 to 16 shooting. Honestly, also more importantly, you got 30 minutes out of him. Once again, with a lot of those big guys, a lot of times you struggle to get, long stretches and actual long game performances, but he managed to stay out of foul trouble, which is also can be an issue for him at times, and that allowed him to stay in the game. And they just had that, relationship going between him and Elliot Cadeau, who ends up with 13, 10, 5 rebounds, 4 steals. Now he does end up with
What?
6
I
turnovers.
mean, it wasn't quite 20 plus, but pretty good game.
No, yeah, he didn't quite get to that 20 plus point wise, but part of it was the fact that his playmaking was working particularly well other than those turnovers. And connected with Mar on a couple of those lobs. You got, some pretty great performances. Even in limited shot attempts, you still got 11 points out of Yaxel Lendeborg, who did only end up playing 14 minutes.
14 minutes.
Yeah.
14 minutes from Yaxel Lendeborg and 91 points on the board for Michigan. So try to wrap your mind around that.
Yeah, and quite frankly, everyone just did step up. But in those 14 minutes, he does go out with a tweaked ankle at some point. He does come back into that game, and still put up some solid minutes down the stretch before they went away from most of the starters. But yeah, to put up 91 points when you only get 14 out of your realistically who's supposed to be your star player. You have to highlight the performances of especially a guy like Trey McKinney off the bench with 16 points, 6 of 9 shooting, 4 for 6 from three. That was very reminiscent of his game against Purdue, where he came off the bench and just I think splashed 3 or 4 threes. When have a guy off the bench that can just come in and play those limited minutes. This time it wasn't limited. He plays 27 minutes, but just able to come in and hit those shots off the bench. That changes any team, but especially Michigan. I said at the arena, if Michigan is shooting over 40% from three, I don't know if you can beat them because they're so good at everything else. If the threes are falling too, what do you do?
I mean, that's not even mentioning what went wrong for Arizona, which was
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah, it really was a lot, but um,
Braden Burries and Koa Pete, a combined 10 for 34 from the field.
yeah, my
Now you get
Braden
29
Burries,
points out of them, but on
sure,
34 shot attempts, it's not going to
yeah,
win you a lot of games.
it was a whole collection of things that just went from bad to worse to nightmare just over the course of the game. Every time you thought, like, okay, just let Arizona settle in, you saw the second half they put up against Purdue, like they'll be fine. Things just kept getting worse and worse and worse to just disrupt whatever efforts or momentum that they were trying to build for a comeback. First of all, Braden Burries just looks off. I thought he was going to have a great game. There's something to be said that certain freshmen do struggle when, the lights are brightest. You can't really say that for Braden Mullins of UConn, who had a great game, but Braden Burry certainly struggled. And usually, if you have, an iffy game out of Burries, well, you still have the Big 12 Player of the Year. Jaden Bradley not only, didn't have the best game, but was constantly in foul trouble. You still do get 25 minutes out of him, but he picked up 2 early ones. Then he picked up a third right at the beginning of, I want to say the third might have still been in the first half. And then beginning of the second half, immediately picks up a fourth foul and had to go sit for big chunks of the game when Arizona was trying to generate something. So it just, whatever they tried to do, Michigan just had an answer for everything.
I mean, it got so bad that they even put in the bench guys. Each of the end of the bench got to play in a Final Four game.
Yep, you got the walk-ons, the end of the bench guys. You got Charlie May, coach's son, get into the game. Despite them being down, at least Tommy Lloyd had the decency to see. When Michigan went to do that for the last minute, he said, "Might as well get my guys in there." So you did get to see the end of the bench guys in the Final Four, which is not a typical experience.
Well,
But
no one to hold him, no one to fold him, and no one to wave the white flag because, you're going to be going back with Arizona at some point
yeah,
because
this
he's not
is this.
taking the UNC job. So good for Tommy Lloyd
No,
for signing that extension.
yeah, I
Loyalty is
think.
rewarded around these parts.
It is, and it's great to see him stick around and continue to try to build this program to where it needs to be. Now, obviously, he didn't reach the end of the tunnel like he wanted to this year, but he still has the program in a fantastic place. Something else that I think that's just kind of interesting to look between the two games, we noticed sitting there was a heavy imbalance in the first game between Illinois and UConn of the assists. Illinois only ends up with 3 assists to UConn's 14 in that, low scoring game. But interestingly enough, I didn't really notice it as much throughout the course of the game because it was so much of a blowout. I wasn't really looking too much at the stats, but that also happened a very similar fashion in Michigan, Arizona. Michigan had 22 assists on their 33 made field goals. Arizona only had 5 assists. So you had both of these games where the winning team just found a way to make their opponents play a lot of individual disrupted basketball, and that was a fantastic way to throw both of these teams off of their games and what they typically like to play. And both of the losing teams you found essentially just kind of shooting themselves in the foot. Illinois and Arizona both struggled with turnovers. Arizona more so. They had 14 turnovers in this game. But a lot of fouls on both sides. So you actually saw some similarities in both of these games out of the losing and winning teams. It's just that the margin was, close for the one and astronomically large for the other.
Boss movement, man. Move the ball. Put it in the boot.
Well, and that's the thing is, it wasn't just the concept of Arizona not moving the ball well, it was the fact that Michigan just shut down so much of their movement and, blew up their screens and, their lobs to the basket or, back down post ups. Everything that they tried to do, these teams just seem to have answers for. And you got to give credit to the coaches and their game plans because clearly game plans did go into effect and had serious effect in both of these games. And that moves us on to the two teams that were able to, execute those game plans better. You have UConn and 1 seed Michigan. And going into this national championship game on ESPN right now, their matchup predictor has it at about 70 to 30 percentage wise in favor of Michigan. And
Okay.
obviously, and that's the
Sure.
thing, you
Sure,
can
man.
you can apply whatever spread or predictions to it, but this game is going to be a battle no matter what.
Michigan is a 6.5 point favorite as it stands right now of filming.
Yeah.
Whatever you want.
So but obviously, both of these teams have put up some fantastic performances to get here, both in the Final Four and, far, far before this. But what I want to kind of get into before we get into our predictions, and quite frankly, I think our predictions are probably going to be relatively obvious on their own. But what I want to hear from you, because I know that obviously you are a Big East believer and UConn believer and truther and all of this. Out of this matchup,
A Big East believer and Big East truther over anything. All right. As soon as the regular season starts again, I'm gonna go right back to hating UConn. It's just
oh, well,
how the Big
yeah.
East how the Big East functions is that everybody hates each other during the regular season, and then whichever teams make it into the tournament, we all root for them because better the Big East than literally anybody else, especially a second-rate, classless, expansionist conference like the Big Ten. Ugh. West
Calling the
Coast teams, get out of here, man.
calling the Big Ten second rate as they've won the national championship in so many sports over this past year is kind of crazy, but
Well,
all
when's the
power
last
to you.
national championship in college basketball?
Quite possibly tomorrow, but we'll find out. But what I want
Well,
to hear from you in this one is
yeah, that
out of
argument
this.
could that argument could hold up for maybe another day or potentially another year because we got something really special on the horizon.
We do. It'll be very interesting. But what I want to hear from you in this one is, and I kind of want to go the opposite way for me, is from what you see from these two teams, how can UConn win this game?
Gonna be
What is it
tough.
going to take?
So the thing that stood out to me almost instantly is when these schools make deep runs, there's usually a feature big that is 7 foot or taller, that is an absolute game wrecker. Now, Michigan happens to have two of those guys, which is going to be tough, But I'm
Only
more
one
so
of them's over seven
specifically,
feet, though.
yeah, how tall is Yaxel? Like
6'9".
6'10"? Okay. Well, he plays like he's 7 foot and like he has guard skills, so that's going to be a whole nother problem. Um, Caravan's got him though. But I'm more so talking about Ade Mara. Um, Ade Mara was such a big factor in the Final Four game, much bigger than you or I had even expected. So shutting him down is going to be absolutely paramount because when you have the guards roaming the perimeter and a Daymar just kind of posting up down low, and then you just kind of throw it up and he can go get it and dunk it or put it back because Michigan got a lot of second chance points or alley-oop dunks in that Final Four game based on that. Shutting him down is going to be key. So on the flip side, it wasn't too long ago that Dan Hurley and UConn got to face a 7 foot tall big man shot blocker every single day in practice. You can roll your eyes at me all you want, but if you're playing with a guy like that for however long, there's going to be a point in time where you kind of know how to beat a guy like that. It and I hate to bring this up because there was another team with a dominant 7 foot tall big man that went against UConn in the national championship and it did not work out so hot. I'm not specifically going to name who that is, and I'm sorry that I'm even bringing this up, but I feel like that prior experience in those national championship games is going to play a big role in developing a game plan. Dan Hurley is such a good coach. He might even be a generational coach. I think if he wins 3 or 4, then you can definitely make that argument because the track record, especially in the last 4 March Madnesses, are undeniable. And I keep going back to that stat that he's 18-1 in the last 4 tournaments, blah, 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 blah. But all the guy does is win national championships. You can't really get much better than that. So I think you got to trust your guys. You trust the experience. You trust the game plan that you have written. You limit the guards as well because obviously letting Michigan run around like wild across the arc isn't going to do you any good. So you got to slow them down as well. But that's going to be key. That was a much more long-winded answer and all over the place answer. That was a Tim style answer.
I was gonna say that sounded a lot more like me than like you typically. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that my only counterpoint to that is certainly you have the experience on the coaching staff, but how many of these guys were around for some of those games? Obviously, you have a lot of these teams where it's like it's a lot of newer guys. Terrace Reed has only been there for the 2 years. I'm not so sure about some of those other ones with like Solo Ball and Silas Demery, but a lot of these are
Yes,
rather new
Solo Ball's
creationist
a
teams.
junior. Silas
Okay.
Demery's a junior. Caravan's a senior.
Yeah,
So you
obviously
have
Caravan is
guys.
your ultimate experience factor there. So yeah, I mean it's a good point. The experience obviously plays a big role, and I think there's a big reason why, they've been able to make this run once again. On the flip side for me, I think the biggest factor in this game is UConn defending Michigan's pick and roll. Because that is going to open up or close doors for so much of what Michigan wants to do. First of all, you and I saw firsthand the effect of what Cadeau and Mara were able to do in the pick and roll and lobbing to the basket and everything like that. But also, you saw Michigan have a ton of success from the 3-point line. And that is not just because, oh, pass, pass, pass around the outside. Oh, let's just shoot a shot. They worked inside out super, super well and were able to get drives and kicks, both, either getting it to Mara and him, trying to spray out and find the open man, and then find your one more pass from there. Or even more specifically, a lot of these pick and rolls where you get Cadeau into the lane, you get, Namari Burnett in the lane, or any of these guys that will operate in these pick and rolls, and then get your team into rotations. If Michigan, like I said earlier, if you get Michigan shooting the three ball well, it is almost impossible to stop them. So what UConn and you could potentially see, it'll be very interesting. You talk about matchups and experience. You could potentially see UConn try to employ a similar strategy to what they did against Purdue in the 2024 championship game. If you want to beat us by traditional post ups, have fun, but you're not going to beat us from the outside. I don't know if that would work with all of the interior options that Michigan has. You know,
Yeah,
they
that is
have
the
more
main
options than
difference.
just Purdue did with just going into Edie. But in terms of a style of if you want to try to take away the 3-point line and say,
Yeah.
we'll take your twos as often as you can beat them, we'll take our chances on what we can do on the offensive end. I almost think that might be a better strategy than just trying to limit a lot of different things for Michigan, because if you try to shut off the water on too many different, parts of their game, you might struggle to stop much of anything. And especially against a team that can beat you in as many different ways as Michigan, I think that pick and roll is going to be the basis of what you need to handle if you want to try to sort of stifle this offense that has been steamrolling through anybody that you put in front of them so far this tournament.
Well, clearly Vegas thinks that Michigan is going to win by a few scores here, but let's see what we think. Tim, who do you got to win the national championship?
Let me preface this by saying that,
Oh God.
as we pointed out yesterday in our conversations, I'd like to I'd like to pick the Meteor. I would like neither of these teams to win this basketball game. But when it comes
Yeah,
to
that was a running joke as we're sitting up in the nosebleeds, huh? As you
it
realize
was
that this was your worst nightmare
it is.
for the national championship game matchup.
It truly is, but trying to put the feelings aside and looking at these teams, and also there's some amount of the picking the lesser of the two evils. Legitimately, I think matchup wise, as they have in almost any of these other games, it's still incredibly hard to match up against Michigan, especially if they are playing well. And one of the things that I didn't mention before, when you talk about some of the prep stuff, I don't know if you've seen the concept of Dusty May holding practices of they set up a temporary basketball hoop in the big house and essentially had Michigan practice in there for getting the feel of shooting and playing in a big football stadium. I think that has worked a little bit to Michigan's advantage in terms of understanding that environment. Because basketball players will tell you at that level, it is way different depth perception wise to play in a massive arena like that than where the fans are kind of closer in on you. But outside of that, that was just kind of a fun thing that I wanted to note. I think that Michigan poses too many big front court threats for UConn to really contain all of them. I'm not going to say that I think, that Mara is going to win the individual matchup against Terrace Reed, but I do think that when you put those lineups out there, if I'm Lendeborg, I love having Alex Caravan on me. Or here's the thing, because Caravan
Well,
typically plays the
well,
four, right?
you're not putting a freshman on him. Doesn't get
Okay,
much
no, no,
older than Caravan.
no, but here's the
No
thing,
disrespect there.
and this is what I talk about the matchups. Caravan typically
Yes.
plays the four for UConn, right?
Yes, 3
Who plays
4.
the three? Because with that starting lineup, that's who's guarding Yaxel. Because you've got Morris Johnson
Yeah.
Jr. playing the four. So if I'm Michigan, I want to try to exploit Yaxel's matchup as
Yeah.
much as possible. Because if you're able to keep that big lineup out, as often as you can, yes, is it going to be a little bit harder for them to guard some of, UConn and, chasing Caravan around at the three?
Maybe you give Reba a little bit more playing time.
And they
Maybe
might
that's the
try that.
solution.
And they might try that, but that's why Michigan is so hard to match up is teams have to go outside of their normal rotations just to try to handle that amount of size on their
Ooh.
defensive end.
Uh, the three. You get Braylon Mullins?
That's what I'm saying
The
is
freshman?
is who guards Yaxel in this case. And
Oh, I guess it would be Caravan, or Yaxel's gonna be feeling real disrespected.
and that's the thing. That's what I think it's going to come down to. And
I
and
was
I don't
getting
think that this is going to mean that Michigan's going to have this blowout game, but I think there's going to be enough individual plays where Michigan's able to exploit matchups that I don't think UConn's going to be able to overcome, even if they try to exploit, Caravan having a bigger guy on him, chasing him around, for threes for a lot of the game. So I will take the Michigan Wolverines, although I'm still hoping for a shock meteor.
Man, bump that. We're crowning a dynasty. Give me UConn, man. The best coaches win. This isn't just an analytic pick. This is also a vibes pick because that's what I'm trying to go back to, right? Because if there's one thing that we've learned is that we don't know anything. So And there is something to be said for having been in this position not once, not twice, but the third time.
Sure. And that's the thing is like, obviously yes, Dan Hurley and UConn have all the experience in national championship games specifically. But you cannot deny that Dusty May has had, deep postseason success of his own with his run with FAU. So, he knows what it takes to get here. It's a question of, does he know what it takes
Now you got to win it.
yeah, to pull it out and win it. And I think he does. I think he has the roster to do it. I think these guys, you want to talk about vibes? I may hate these guys, but Michigan's players are all vibes constantly. They're hopping on Instagram lives. So, fan hands Yaxel Bell after the game,
They
and
don't got no
he's
filter. They don't got
they
no
really
PR.
don't. So you
They
want
don't
to
got
talk about
no
like
PR
if
training.
you're worried about a team being like tight and uncomfortable in a situation, a big game, I'm sorry, that is not Michigan. They have not shown any amount of discomfort with any of these teams, any of these matchups. So I'm gonna trust in the matchup nightmare that is the Wolverines roster. Although, like I said, I don't think that this is gonna, surmount to any type of, big time blowout like you've seen in so many of these games. Although it is possible, I think that there's just too much talent and too much experience on UConn's roster to let this one really get away. And once you get into that late game, it truly is anybody's game.
Since we didn't cover this tournament in 2025, technically speaking, UConn has won back-to-back national championships in running the table lore. So
In
they're
running
going
the
for the
table
three-peat.
coverage,
In running the
but
table covers,
that
they're going
is
for a three-peat. So I'm gonna pick them to win a national championship, literally until they don't. But you're gonna have to watch the game to see which one of us is right.
so yeah, I mean, tune in tomorrow night because it is going to be a crazy game. And I think that these two teams definitely both deserve to be there given their performances throughout the course of this tournament, as much as I, really did prey on UConn's downfall for most of the time. But that's all we've got for today. One final game for all the marbles, and then as always, our best of the bracket coverage. So
Plus a
stay
vlog.
tuned. I was gonna say, stay tuned for our little vlog of the Final Four, covering all of our experiences. It was a super fun experience to do that, and hopefully, maybe sometime down the line that we'll have the chance to do it again. But if you want more from us, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, we're out.